With the new year, a new day in Illinois.
I don't know that I thought I'd see it so quickly.
Illinois will be the 11th state to legalize recreational cannabis.
We have been baby stepping towards this for a few years now.
It will touch society in ways few could have imagined.
And it's about hopefully changing whole communities. So we're doing it because I think we're supposed to.
And the state promises that in the process, years of stigma from criminal convictions will be erased.
We can govern our state with the courage to admit the mistakes of our past.
This is an NBC 5 News special report, Cannabis in Illinois. Hello, I'm Phil Rogers. Whether you're for it or against it, there is no disputing that legal marijuana is going to mean big changes here in Illinois. In the next half hour, we'll explore how some of those changes will affect everyday life, in some ways dramatically. But first, we wanted to take you to a place where legal pot is happening right now, the state which was the first to legalize marijuana sales over 5 years ago. Marijuana, of course, is already grown and sold legally in Illinois. The state is home to 55 dispensaries licensed to sell medical marijuana to a limited clientele, about 94,000 people. And many of those businesses will be the first to sell recreational pot in 2020. Contrast that with this area of Broadway in Denver, Colorado, known as the Green Mile, believed to be the largest concentration of marijuana dispensaries in the world. Colorado is home to over 570 recreational marijuana businesses, and 172 of those are here in the Mile High capital, more than McDonald's and Starbucks combined. What do we have here? Those look like Girl Scout cookies.
So these are going to be our edibles.
Step into Denver's Medicine Man dispensary and you'll see the kind of place you may see here in Illinois. This is cannabis in every size and shape imaginable. Not just edibles, but also concentrates called wax and shatter, and other smokables which look like they'd be at home in a department store.
And you only need a little bit, like just a tiny, tiny bit.
You can buy actual plants here and seeds. Illinois will only allow plant sales for medical patients. But to be sure, you can also find your grandfather's marijuana here too.
So these are going to be some joints.
Multiple strains, packaged in little canisters like these called an eighth. That's an eighth of the 1 ounce you're legally allowed to buy.
If you smell this one, you're going to definitely smell lemon.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I smell marijuana too. There are rules. Here's what happens when you go inside. The first thing you do is you show a guard your ID to prove you're really 21. From there, you walk straight to the counter. And while this is still largely a cash business, yes, you can use plastic here in Colorado, as long as it's a debit card. At least for now, expect to pay cash here in Illinois. That's because most federally chartered banks still shy away from marijuana business. There is a federal bill pending that would change that.
Now it's time for the federal government to step up and approach this with a good government approach like the states are doing.
Ashley Kilroy runs Denver's Office of Marijuana Policy. She says in the over 5 years since legalization, her city has seen no increase in crime relating to the drug. And the cannabis taxes and fees brought in nearly $47 million for Denver last year alone. It's a lot of money.
It is a lot of money.
In Colorado, much of that money goes to regulation of the program and education. As we'll explain later, Illinois has other plans involving millions of marijuana dollars. As for the culture, most locals in Colorado insist it has not changed.
What we have found is the most dire predictions on either side by the advocates or the opponents really have not come true, with some opponents saying, oh, crime's going to skyrocket, or advocates saying, you're going to bring in so much tax revenue you'll be able to pave the streets in gold.
Marijuana does generate local revenue, but here in Illinois, some communities have already turned it down.
The city is officially in an opt-out status today.
West suburban Naperville voted against recreational marijuana. Every Illinois community has the right to do that, but Naperville did so over the objections of Mayor Steve Cherico.
I couldn't find any practical reason not to have dispensaries here in Naperville and be able to regulate it and tax it.
By doing that, the mayor believes his community may be leaving as much as $3 million in potential sales tax revenue on the table.
Yeah, I don't believe that.
Councilman Kevin Coyne is firmly in the no camp and believes marijuana would bring far more harm than good.
Expanded drug use and expanded drug culture, I don't think is good for any community and certainly not good for Naperville.
Naperville is going to put the issue to the voters next March. Statewide, other communities have also said no. But in or out, many have watched the model of other states where cannabis is already legal.
We knew when we first started that the world was watching and failure was not an option. We had to get it right.
And Colorado has no shortage of marijuana stores, even outside the capital. Denver is a very big city. This is Nederland, a mountain town with roughly 800 people and 3 cannabis dispensaries. Nederland doesn't even have a pharmacy, but it does have those 3 stores selling pot. Is cannabis part of the culture of Nederland?
Yes.
Miranda Fisher is the Nederland town clerk.
We as a town don't limit how many can be on a block or how many can be in the central business district.
Do you get a lot of first-timers that have never tried the product before?
I would say, yeah, we do. Just because it is legal here and they can.
Scott Lux manages Silver Stem Cannabis, which shares a building with Nederland City Hall. And he says most of his business comes from visitors.
Probably 75 to 80% tourists.
Marijuana is so accepted in this mountain town that they recently lifted a moratorium on new cannabis businesses. And Lux says he thinks time may bring wider acceptance here in Illinois, too.
Once you get through that first year, I think it'll be smooth. There's other states that have kind of paved the way, and maybe you can learn some things from them.
Of course, some marijuana, medical cannabis, is already being grown and sold in Illinois. But with the legalization of recreational pot, that industry is about to get much bigger. We'll look at that and a few cautionary tales when we return. Illinois is already home to nearly 24 cultivation centers growing medical marijuana. Many are now also licensed to grow recreational pot. And some, like this PharmaCann facility in downstate Dwight, are adding on.
We're doubling the capacity here in this Dwight Cultivation Center so that we can put out about twice as much product as we currently put out in the medical scheme. There are about 70 or 80,000 medical patients in the state, and the state is anticipating 700 to 800,000 adult use consumers.
Legal marijuana demands a lot of product. At this growing center in suburban Denver, we watched as cultivators tended hundreds of plants at various stages of development. Each one of these plants will produce about a pound of cannabis flower, worth anywhere from $2,000 to $2,200 on the current Colorado market. Because of that, as you can guess, they receive a lot of tender, loving care.
Yeah, we're expecting a lot out of these ladies.
Cultivator Scott Pelkey showed us how nothing is left to chance. High levels of CO2 are pumped into the growing rooms. Light is carefully controlled. Even the seasons get some help.
We do that with the amount of sleep that the plant gets.
How does a plant sleep?
In the dark, just like us. We force it to sleep and give it 12 hours of darkness. It thinks that fall is coming and winter eventually, and it's going to have to start producing flower, trichomes, and try to reproduce.
It's all aimed at coaxing and coddling these cannabis plants to produce as much THC as possible.
Absolutely. We watch every step and we control every step. Being able to control all that really helps the plant thrive in its environment.
Colorado, of course, is nearly 6 years into legal marijuana. Illinois is just getting started. Safe to say you guys are cranking up for January?
We are cranking as hard as we can crank.
As in Colorado, because of the fact that marijuana is still federally illegal, here in Illinois, nothing can cross state lines. That means everything sold in dispensaries has to be locally produced. Of course, you already know about traditional marijuana, which looks like this. But with legalized cannabis here in Illinois, you'll also see things like this, and this, and this. Resins, waxes, and especially edibles, packaged in ways which don't look like drugs at all. And some argue that because they are so unfamiliar to many, they may carry unique risks.
When we had recreational legalized, then actually anybody could come to the state and utilize, right? And so actually what we saw was a spike in emergency department visits.
Denver emergency doctor Andrew Monty says while many of those were tourists taking advantage of first-time ever legal weed, the most common patients are regular, even daily users.
The most common reason we see patients coming to the emergency department is actually a syndrome called Cannabinoid Hyperemesis syndrome. So that's a cyclic vomiting syndrome that occurs when patients actually use heavily. So they use every day.
This study, which Dr. Monti co-authored, shows that in Colorado, while smokable marijuana is still by far the most frequent method of use, edibles have led to an unusually high number of emergency room visits.
We know that edibles are associated with a 30-fold increased risk of actually ending up in an emergency department.
There's also the issue of dosing. Cookies, and especially candies like these chocolate bars, can contain multiple doses of THC, but some users don't always get that message.
I challenge you to eat a tenth of a cookie.
Because of issues like these, 5 years in, some critics in Colorado are especially concerned about children.
There's a normalization going on with kids. Perception of harm is going down.
The state of Colorado says over 19% of high school students report they use marijuana, roughly even with the national average. But the organization Smart Colorado worries about the many forms available to kids.
They don't perceive some of these products as being harmful when some of them are much more harmful than the marijuana in the past.
Her group calls those the unintended consequences of legal marijuana. At a recent cannabis convention here in Chicago, vendors like Scott Burns were displaying difficult-to-open, child-resistant packaging, which will be required here in Illinois.
The way you pull on it, and now I can get it open.
To help prevent those unintended dangers.
And that's gummy worms. Children could think that's for them.
Absolutely.
One other thing. Cannabis today is not the pot grown in dorm room closets in the 70s. Modern science has produced a much more powerful plant.
When you and I were kids, right, Phil, the percentage of THC was in the single percentages, 1 to 2%. But now, actually, the percentage of THC is actually average of about 20% here in Colorado.
There is another dimension to this. What was against the law is now legal, but there are still rules. We'll look at that part of the story when we return. To learn more about how recreational cannabis might impact policing here in Illinois, we wanted to meet officers in a state where pot has already been legalized.
I'll be 10A headed up to Estes Park.
We're on the road just outside Fort Collins, Colorado with Jeremiah Sharp of the Colorado State Patrol.
It's been 5 years. Is it mainstream now?
Yes.
So much so, the cannabis company sponsors some of the very roadways Trooper Sharp patrols.
For a lot of people, it's something that just blends into the horizon for them on their day-to-day life, and they don't necessarily give it a second thought.
Pot may be mainstream in Colorado, but it can be complicated for law enforcement. Unlike alcohol, which has had a breathalyzer test for decades, right now there is no approved device to test for cannabis impairment, meaning traditional field sobriety tests, walking a straight line or standing on one foot, are the main indicators of impairment.
Forces the officer to slow down, ask more questions, make more observations, and collect more evidence.
Unlike alcohol, which you drink, cannabis can be consumed in many forms. Legalization means some are trying it for the very first time.
People that have never used it, and they're starting on something that is extremely potent, and they don't know how that's going to affect them.
Fatal accidents in Colorado where marijuana was present in some form have more than doubled since legalization, but peaked in 2017. That year, marijuana in all forms represented about 15% of DUI tickets written in Colorado.
Trying it and then jumping in the car probably isn't a great decision.
Here in Illinois, police will face those same challenges. It will still be illegal to smoke pot in public, and the law calls for very specific limits on possession. 30 grams of cannabis flower, 5 grams of concentrate, 500 milligrams of infused products. But you won't have to prove you bought it at a legal dispensary.
The officer will be confined by the ability to investigate whether the person is above or below the possession limits, not necessarily investigating where did the person obtain this product.
The state of Illinois says it won't be tracking purchases and that use of cannabis will not be considered a factor in issuance of a FOID card or gun ownership. However, gun purchasers do have to fill out this federal form. And it has recently been updated to note that the federal government still considers marijuana a deal breaker when buying a gun, even if it's been legalized in the state where you live.
That remains a federal firearm prohibitor.
It goes without saying that the transition from illegal to legal marijuana will be something of a cultural change for law enforcement. But CPD told us they actually anticipate one benefit.
This eliminates the need for open-air drug markets and provides opportunities for citizens who are interested in consuming THC to go somewhere legally to purchase it and avoid those terrible areas where open-air drug markets, have been a persistent problem.
When Illinois made the decision to legalize cannabis, lawmakers said they would only do so if the new law included remedies for past wrongs and a fast track for those targeted by the war on drugs to actually benefit from the cannabis business. How the state intends to make that happen when we return. There is no disputing that for many, cannabis can be a veritable cash cow. And across Illinois, thousands are hoping to cash in on what everyone agrees will be a multi-million-dollar bonanza.
We are gearing up everything, security, stock, employees, absolutely everything, because it's coming really, really quickly.
As a result, some are literally lining up to get even a small piece of the pot pie.
If you would have told me this 5 years ago, that I would have been standing at a cannabis fair right now, I would have said, you better not bet the farm on that.
This was the scene at a recent job fair offered by Oakton Community College, which now offers an entire curriculum in marijuana dispensary and patient care.
I hadn't seen this type of response since the days of IT.
And cannabis is big business nationwide, with estimates of nearly $11 billion in legal sales last year alone. We saw big numbers like that when we visited Colorado. Strictly from a cash perspective, marijuana's been a big success here in Colorado. Over $7 billion in sales since legalization 5 years ago. Because of that, you can expect to see lots of other industries sprouting up. In Colorado, you can book a cannabis vacation through a company called 420 Tours, and an all-inclusive cannabis couples getaway, which includes something called a marijuana massage. You can even bring cannabis into your kitchen.
We're here today to make a infused shrimp Alfredo for you.
Denver-based chef Jared Farina conducts cannabis cooking classes.
We're gonna cook them for about 1 to 2 minutes on each side.
Whipping up everything from pot-infused pasta dishes to spring rolls and soufflés. Oh, it's wonderful. Back here in Illinois, on a recent weekend, it was a packed house at this bud tender training session at a suburban hotel.
Think about what you currently do.
The instructor's message that there is about to be a lot of opportunity, but the past illegal marijuana experience probably won't be your best qualification.
Most of these business owners have spent a lot of money to open up their shops, and the last thing that they want to know is that the people that are working for them think this is a game.
I'm a nurse. I love the idea of helping people, and I'm getting close to retirement, trying to figure out what I'm going to do next. So this might be it.
Legal marijuana does represent new opportunity and the chance for some to cash in on the ground floor of a brand new industry. But behind all that lies another story, which backers insist is at the very heart of legalization in Illinois.
I was just lost.
Gina Ramirez was arrested for marijuana possession in 2016.
Everything I worked for just went down the drain because of one little arrest.
Under the new law, the state of Illinois will automatically purge the records of hundreds of thousands of what are considered low-level offenders, those arrested for possession of 30 grams or less.
I think it's morally unjust to hold others back for something that is now legal.
Cook County State's Attorney Kim Fox agrees the expungements will include close to 1 million people who did break the law. But society, she says, does occasionally change its mind about what is considered right and wrong.
I think about laws that forbade, African Americans and whites to marry. That was on the books. People could go to jail for that. And we look back and we say, really, do we still want to hold people accountable to that?
Already, hundreds of marijuana cases are being purged from state records. It is still a deal breaker for pot cases tied to violent crimes. But as marijuana becomes legal in Illinois, the state believes as many as 770,000 cases may be overturned.
We're not going to let them labor with those convictions while others make money off of it.
It's one aspect of the law which backers insist sets Illinois apart from any other state where marijuana is now legal.
There's no way we can be a part of legalizing an activity that has literally destroyed whole communities. And we're going to license some people to make millions and billions of dollars on this and not take care of those who are disproportionately impacted in the first place. There's something fundamentally unfair about an approach that doesn't take that into consideration.
The Illinois law is designed to give an inside track for participation in and even ownership of marijuana businesses by those from hard-hit areas. And answering critics who predict rampant use by young people, Hutchinson argues just the opposite may prove true.
When I look at people who ask, how are you going to keep this away from kids? I think about the person on the street that's walking right up to your kids and never asking for ID and not caring at all what they're getting or what they're imbibing. I think the biggest misconception is when people realize that there are a lot of upwardly mobile people with titles and, you know, raising their kids and going to work every day who consume this product.
Do you believe people are going to be surprised to learn which of their friends are doing it and maybe have been doing it all along?
Oh, yes.
Regulators say they want the program to start slowly to give more people an opportunity to benefit from legalization. One thing is certain, in a multitude of aspects, it's going to be a very new era in Illinois. I'm Phil Rogers. Thank you for joining us.